I treat suicidality because I know the subject inside and out. I know it personally and professionally. At 8 years old, I became suicidal. I'm not going to go into any of the history behind that, but the point for you needing to know is that for the next 24 years after my 8th year, I continued to fight for my life every day of my life. I did not understand why I had to do this, but I somehow got the idea that everyone fought for their life like that every day of their life. For 24 years, folks, 24 very long traumatic years. At 32, I was delivered from my active suicidality. But I will tell you this, as I will explain later on, and I will try to talk as fast as I can. I will speed up the cadence because, Dorothy will be there going, you got 5 minutes, all right, so I'll be ready for you. So follow me quickly. I may be talking like a radio operator here. All right, giving you coordinates. But the important thing for you to get is that after I was delivered from my active suicidality, after many suicide attempts that I didn't understand, and it's important for you to know also that during that 24 years, I only told my parents that I was suicidal. My parents told me that I needed to suck it up and drive on. They were in the military, but they used their civilian words for that. And so that's what I did. I never told anyone because I knew from what I'd been told, nobody wanted to hear that stuff. It made people feel uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do. So I never told anyone. Well, became evident to my closest friends that there was something wrong, especially after the 3 psychiatric hospitalizations after 3 major attempts. So I'm going to talk to you about how I treat suicidality, but how I learned about suicidality and how it forms in people's minds. The important thing to understand, and one thing Greg said this morning was, you remember that a lot of military people, we've discovered that they have never been deployed? I will tell you, most of the suicides have never been deployed in the military, especially in the National Guard. So what's interesting about that is then, what else is going on in people's lives? I'm going to tell you some pretty shocking things, and I'm going to spare you a lot of the data simply because I don't have time to give you all the statistics. So what I'm going to tell you is simply this, that there is a lot more suicidal ideation out there than you could possibly ever imagine. And people don't tell you about it because they don't want to burden you. And because maybe they've told someone else and that person has told them to just suck it up and drive on. So I'm going to teach you later on how to help people who are suicidal and not to be afraid of suicidality. So what is suicidality itself? Suicidality comprises thoughts of suicide, attempts of suicide, and death by suicide. And a Compassionate Friends Network uses the words death by suicide instead of committing suicide because it sort of destigmatizes it. One of our biggest problems in dealing with suicidality and mental health problems is the stigma within the society against it. All right, so that is what suicidality is. It's a fairly recent term. It's only been since 2006 since we've used that big, long term, but it encompasses everything about suicide. So let's talk about how it develops. I found some commonalities in the decades that I have treated suicidality. By the way, you can find this on my website, which is jsp3.org. You cannot Google it. It will not come up on Google. They won't pay for optimization. Okay, that's neither there nor there. But if you put the URL, www.jsp3.org, it will come up. And you'll find out all this information that I'm giving you today, plus oodles more. But anyway, So let's get back to what causes suicidality. The commonalities I found are this. An individual comes on very early in their life and they get the idea that suicide is a viable option. It's an acceptable option to dealing with problems. When I was a youngster, one of my girlfriend's fathers killed himself. He killed himself, and besides saying nothing, what they did say was, he's in a better place. Oh, really? According to who? But that was the word. And I've learned that my patients tell me that most of the time when they're early on in their lives and people don't talk about suicide, someone suicides and they don't talk about it at all. What in our society, how do we interpret not talking about something? It's usually you either agree with it or you don't care. So if you don't talk about suicide to your youngsters, your kids, your compatriots, that's the message that our society sends. I don't care, or usually I don't know what to do about it. So the very first thing that happens is that they develop a method of accepting suicide as an acceptable option. Are you with me so far? Okay, so that goes sort of subterranean. That goes subconscious, and they just hold on to that. Then there comes a time in their life when they get boxed into a corner with untenable psychological problems, physical problems, financial problems, sociological problems, whatever problems they have, and they can't figure their way out. Immediately think, well, I know somebody who's in a better place, and this is what they did. They suicided. And suddenly, that feeling of relief from that problem floods their brain with endorphins, that pain-relieving neurosubstance that we have in all of our bodies. That's what you felt a minute ago when you were laughing. Right? Okay, so now you've got these endorphins in your head, and every time you think about being free, the suicide and the freedom and the endorphins get matched in your brain. And a neural pathway begins to develop in your brain, saying, this is a viable option. So, the question, I often talk about neural pathways in the brain because it's easier to say, do you know the Oregon Trail and how they went through all of those ruts? Have you seen the ruts, the trail ruts? That's where the wagon wheels, yeah, see, David's seen, yeah, so you can see where the wagon wheels over years and years and years have made ruts right straight through the bedrock. You can stand in them. It's rock. That's a neural pathway in your brain, and that's how permanent it is. And once you get in that rut, you can't get out of it. And it's driven by endorphins. Now let's talk about what it feels like to feel the power of hope. Okay, every one of you, I bet, has woke up on one morning and said, I don't feel so good. Maybe I should call the doctor. And then you say, oh, no, I'm not going to call the doctor. I got to get to work. I got too much work to do. I'm not going to call the doctor. And then you feel worse. And you say, oh, my goodness, maybe I should call the doctor. And you go back and forth. And then you finally decide to call the doctor. And you call the doctor, and immediately you feel better. And you think, why did I call the doctor? And then all of a sudden you start feeling worse again. That immediate feeling of relief is the endorphins of hope. The hope that the doctor will relieve your pain. It is the same endorphins that you feel from the relief of removing yourself from a problem that seems untenable or unsolvable. So you see, it builds up a hope pathway in your brain. But you don't know that at the time. You have no idea what's going on in your brain. If you did, you wouldn't do it. But guess what? You don't know it, so you kind of go there because it makes you feel better. Originally, I never thought about killing myself. I just thought about being out of the problem, taking myself out of the problem. So it began to be sort of an addictive thought pattern. where I continued on, and every time I got backed into a corner, immediately the thought came up, gee, I'd like to be out of here. How can I get out of here? And then all of a sudden, just thinking about being away wasn't enough to bring on enough endorphins. So I began further down the road, kind of addictive thinking, well, now I need to move towards getting the job done. And that brought endorphins. So you see how it progresses over time, not necessarily overnight. And individuals who you hear just quote, quote, up and shoot themselves, guess what? They don't just up and shoot themselves. Generally, statistics show that there's 6 attempts and many practice sessions before that. So whether you hear about it or not is another question, isn't it? You usually hear much later. Okay, so are you with me now on the psychobiology of this and how it's going? Okay, so then basically we have the stigma of our society saying, don't tell, because if you do tell, someone will slap you in the hospital. I have a patient, she came to see me and she said, I'm suicidal, but I don't want you to know I'm suicidal because I know you're going to put me in the hospital. I said, guess what? I'm not going to put you in the hospital, but I will monitor you, and you will be honest with me, and when it's time, and I think that this is where you need to go to get safe, that's fine. When I was in the hospitals, when I was in the psych wards, I was there for like 6 to 8 weeks. Now you're there for 72 hours. 72 hours. Do you think you get much? No, you don't. You get sort of warehoused for a little while. And when is the most dangerous time for a suicidal person? Anybody know? While you're in the hospital or 1 week after you leave the hospital. So why did I tell my patient I wouldn't put her in the hospital? Because she's safer outside the hospital. Because what I helped her do was form the Jensen Suicide Prevention Peer Protocol. I invited her friends in, and we taught them about the psychobiology of suicide, not to be afraid of it, that it was a coping mechanism. That is all it is, a coping mechanism. That individuals who think about suicide, they don't want to be dead, they want to be free. They want to be free of the problem that is harassing them. That's it. So if you start problem solving, you can solve suicide and suicidality. You can do it. That's what the Jensen Peer Protocol is all about, is forming a group of people who make certain agreements based on honesty, absolute honesty. You've got to have honesty within this group. And everyone's got to have the education. Everybody's got to be on board with it. Everybody makes reciprocal agreements. Guess what? Do you think you should burden a suicidal person with your problems? Yes! Absolutely. How many people would think, no, you shouldn't do that? Yeah. How many people think, no, you shouldn't bother the people who are suicidal and ask them to do things for you? Right. Guess what? The most powerful thing about a peer protocol is reciprocity. One of my patients says to me, you're not going to believe this, but my friend called me and asked me to help his son work out a math problem. And he said, it took me out of my suicidal depression for 30 minutes, and I felt so good afterwards. Who would think to call a noticeably suicidal person? This fellow was in a deep suicidal depression. And I told his group, I told his peer protocol group, call him and ask him for favors. Drag him out of the house, call him on his stuff. So, as simple as that, huh? So that's how we learn to understand suicidality. That's how we learn not to be afraid of it. That's how we learn to help people, by being open and understanding and compassionate about it. That it's a coping mechanism. So now let's ask this question. Does it go away? Nope. It gets extinguished a bit, but it doesn't go away forever. This is what happens. And here's a good example of me, all right? Because how can a person who was suicidal for 24 years, not have a pretty severe, deeply rutted neural pathway, right? All right, so last summer I'm driving along. I'm down I-5. I'm feeling very, very upset and very, very put upon and all those other negative emotions. And immediately comes to my head suicide. What? I'm a perfectly happy person. I'm happily married. I've got a beautiful cat. I've got a beautiful house. What is my problem? So I pulled over to the side of the road. I called one of my JSP3 people, and she said, "What the heck is going on with you?" And I said, "Well, let's figure it out." She said, "Okay, walk me back from here. What is going on?" She's not a psychotherapist. She's a CPA. She's not into feelings. She's into numbers. But she knows what to do because I taught her what to do. She knows immediately, Randy, whenever you have those feelings, that means you've got problems that you have not identified, and you need to find out what they are, and you need to solve them immediately. So we walked all the way through it. I said, oh, I get it. I know exactly what I have to do. The next day I took care of it, no problem. But you see, I wasn't afraid of the suicidality anymore because I knew what it meant. It meant I have a problem I have not identified that I need to solve ASAP. Is it making sense to you guys? Are you not afraid of suicidality anymore? Are you going to reach out to people who might have those warning signs that isolating, having difficulty with problems, kind of becoming a little withdrawn, maybe making goodbye statements, maybe giving their stuff away, giving all of those signs that you see on all of those websites? Those signs are great, but if you don't reach out to that person and with compassion and tell them what you have just learned, and tell them they can go to my website and they can download all this information. You can download a booklet that tells you how to form a peer support group, what to do, what to say. You know what? You are now empowered. Every single one of you in this room now has all the information you need. Got it? You are terrific. You guys, you got the deer in the headlights look. That's all right. That's okay. I'm used to it, believe me. I'm used to it. So I'm available to each and every one of you. All you have to do is call me up. All you have to do is email me and I'll respond to you. Because my mission in life is that those 24 years of pain and agony do not go for naught.